Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome back to the Bahamut Cat's Beginner's Guide. Wow, it's been a really long time. Sorry about that for you people who had watched the previous ones as they came out and had this big long gap. This series has been quite difficult to conceive because it's gonna change the fundamental way in which we've been conducting ourselves so far in it. Previously, progress through the game in the way I was doing it, the most accessible possible way, no gacha, has been fairly easy to do, fairly easy to show, fairly easy to keep my cat levels low and show you a way to do the levels, allowing you to bring in your cats with your levels and make the job easier for yourself. But now, as we get into this fourth series and more difficult levels, things start to become mandatory, things which I'd rather not need to have to use, and higher levels start to become to need to be mandatory. So the gap in time, not that long, but there would be a kind of gap between you doing Empire Cats Chapter 3 and this if you did it at the levels that I had in Empire Cats Chapter 3. If you had higher, you're probably fine to start off where we are now, but the higher levels start to become a lot more important. But more on that later in the series. At the start of it, we're going to be looking at the cat that we acquired after completing Empire of Cats Chapter 3 Moon, Bahamut Cat. Possibly one of the most used cats in the entire game. Bahamut, as you may well know, evolves from a normal Bahamut Cat to a crazed Bahamut Cat. Now, there are actually crazed cats that we'll be looking at in this series. They're different from crazed Bahamut. He's sort of called crazed without being a crazed unit. Ignore it. He's 4,500 monies and he's your second legend. Do you remember Valkyrie Cat? That was your first legend. Nowhere near as useful as Bahamut Cat is, to be honest. Bahamut Cat is a very useful unit because it does a lot of damage. And we're gonna take it into the future, which we've just started working on the start of, to show you how it attacks and how best to use it. Let's use this BB bunny to illustrate here. We're gonna stall it with our wool cat a little bit to start off with, and then we're gonna spawn our Bahamut in. 4,500 monies, and here he is. A big grey lump with a big purple circle that explodes upon impact on the ground and does damage at that point. Now, a Bahamut can do up to 85,000 damage, if I remember correctly, but I mean, without knowing intricate stats of every enemy, it's not particularly useful having this random number. Just know that it does a lot of damage, and if you keep it protected, it's gonna sit behind things, throw its circle down on things, and explode it, killing them. Now, the important thing about this Bahamut, which actually changes when you get its final form a lot later, is that this is very specifically a ranged unit. You always want to keep meat shields in front of it and never let things bite into the Bahamut, because essentially, once they bite into him, they're going to knock him back and eventually kill him. And when they knock him back, that's going to destroy any attack that he was doing at that point. If he's got his purple circle mid-air and he's about to throw it and something hits it, that just cancels the attack and he has to try and do it again. And sometimes that doesn't even happen. He could get knocked back several times in a row and then just killed, and that's it for him. And there's an example of a delayed attack. You can see just before the thing exploded, Bahamut was knocked back, and then he had to start the entire attack all over again. And that's just one of the things about Bahamut. Makes it very annoying in dangerous circumstances where you really need him to pull off an attack, and it just makes meat shielding very important. But again, easier said than done. Just never do this. Always keep meat shields in front of your Bahamut, because though it's got plenty of range, it can be eaten into by strong enemies. If something gets a lot closer to the Bahamut than where it was when the Bahamut took the shot, it's gonna miss that thing. Or on the flip side, this could work to your benefit. Bahamut, as you could see, threw an attack slightly in front of those Sir Seals, but they bit at my meat shielding, moved forward straight into the attack area. Things are at the same distance from the meat shield as where it started, so Bahamut's going to get shot largely on target. In actual fact, it came up a bit short. You might have been able to see that. That's just the thing with how Bahamut works, really. It sometimes does take its shots a little bit before where most of the enemies are. It's an area attack, but where that area of attack falls changes. Bahamut moves quite slowly, but that also helps in the fact that the meat shields actually move a little bit faster than Bahamut, so you'll always have a surrounding of protection as long as you have the meat shields there. When he shoots in the right place, it's alright. But there's an example there. he came up and shot before the base for no apparent reason. Just be aware that that is something that Bahamut tends to do. We're going to try something a little bit more difficult then in the event stages. Thursday stage is what we're going to try, given that it's a Thursday, and in Thursday stage you can get Sniper Cats, an item that puts a little cat and a balloon up in the sky and knocks back enemies every now and again, the enemy that's at the front of their enemy line. So we start off with Sniper Cat Easy. At this stage in the game, this is where easy stages really do start to become genuinely easy. Back when we only had level 10 cats, they actually posed some form of a challenge, but with how they are at the moment, it's really nothing to worry about. Normal is where we struggled last time, and this time we might have to employ our Bahamut to help us a bit, because now that we have Bahamut, we have a way of inflicting a lot of damage that we didn't have before. Valkyrie can do the odd poke, but as you'll find out later in the series, that poke doesn't actually really do anything of merit at all. Bahamut, however, now finally, we have a great source of damage, more than the basic cats we've been using before, like dragon stacking. As you can see, he misses his shot. He does that quite a lot. Still, area attacks is where he thrives, and hopefully if he... No, okay, he misses his shot again. That's... I should probably get a counter for this. I suppose the point that I'm trying to make is that Bahamut is actually quite a finicky unit. It can do a lot of damage if it's in the right place at the right time and protected well enough. But it's also a very important unit because the trade-off you have for that lack of solid and reliable attacking is a huge amount of damage. And there's a shot he does actually land. Now, that being 1 on the base health is probably an important thing to note. So, that doesn't mean that he did 34,000 and something damage and it just happened to go to base health 1. It's possible, but very unlikely, and that's not what's happened. So, in a level, there'll be enemy units and a boss unit, most often. And that boss unit can come out of the enemy base in different ways. It can either come out on a timer, after X number of seconds, or at a certain base health. Now, if it comes out on a timer, that gives you an opportunity to, if you're fast enough, cheese the level before the boss comes out, which is a part of quite a lot of strategies. But if the boss comes out on base health, it necessarily comes out, at least in most circumstances. And what's happened here is that with Bahamut, we've skipped past the base health that the boss usually comes out at, but instead of the base going to 0 health and us completing the level, the boss has to spawn. So the amount of damage is negated and the boss takes priority so that we have to defeat that before we can defeat the level. Needless to say, that's several tens of thousands of damage that Bahamut does when the shot's actually on target, which is my point. The thing I really want to make clear, probably something that most tutorials wouldn't do, is that it's not your fault if Bahamut's missing. At least, probably. Bahamut does it a lot. A lot of tutorials would have you believe, because they show one run of everything going perfectly, that your Bahamut use is awful. But just remember not to feel bad about yourself if your Bahamut isn't always hitting the shots, because he won't. Usually, at least in his first attack, he'll get it wrong like that. He'll go for the little peons in front of the main enemy and then sort of try and skim the very edge of them with the very front of his attack, and it does barely anything. You have to wait a little while for a Bahamut to do something right. So often a Bahamut will get his attack cancelled. It's just something that happens. You have to try your best to prevent against it with meat shielding, but it's just really important to remember that it's not just you. It happens to everyone, and even though some perfectly gauged and run tutorial might make you think that people can get Bahamut right every time, they really can't. That person's probably tried at doing that run several times. And there we go, we got Sniper Cat +1 and 30 cat food and energy fully recovered because we've completed. Once you have your Bahamut and you level it up, mine's level 20, I've maxed it because this is actually recorded after the episodes that are going to be in the very near future about the crazed cats. If you level your Bahamut up, he's going to do a lot of damage to things. Protect him, wait for him to attack in the right place. He is going to kill things, and he's going to make your job a lot easier. With Bahamut, you can start to really progress through the stories of legend. I haven't made much progress deliberately because I don't really want to do it off the screen. I want to show you what I'm doing. But you can get a lot further than you could without Bahamut with Bahamut. He really is a game changer and allows you to deal with a lot more enemies. Ultimately though, the main reason we were seeking to get Bahamut before anything else was to move on to be able to get the crazed cats. You can't get your crazed cats without Bahamut. Might be a couple of exceptions where you don't actually use Bahamut, but mainly really crucial to being able to do those stages. Crazed stages are when we start to see insane difficulty, expert and insane difficulty, where it starts to get really difficult, and this is the point at which you need your Bahamut. So get your Bahamut, level it up, and then you're going to be ready for the craze stages. But you have to make sure that everything's leveled up, because as we are at the moment, with our user rank not hitting our end goal of 1,600, level 20 is as far as we can get things, right? So we need whatever we have at our disposal to get these crazed cats. Because we could wait and do them when we have a stronger army, but crazed cats in themselves allow you to make a lot more progress through the game, and then the next logical progression after Empire Cats Chapter 3 Moon. And we're going to be doing Into the Future at the same time. So that's a little fact file on Bahamut. There's stats that you can look up about him on the wiki, but stats in isolation don't really matter. They only really matter if you know the stats of everything else and how things work together. How to use him is probably the most useful thing. And now you know. Meat shield in front of him and have patience, essentially. Just remember he's definitely not a melee unit. Meat shield for him. That'll do it then. In the next couple of episodes we're going to be starting off getting the crazed cats, that being the crazed cat itself, and then the crazed tank. That's the usual order that people go in. They are essentially fast and scary versions of all of the basic cats that we've acquired. I'll talk more about them in that. But until then, perhaps look at the other tutorials if you've just looked at this video in isolation. I'm going through the entire game, giving tips in order to progress rather than things in isolation like one level or another level, where you should be upgrading, what you should be upgrading, what you should be aiming for. There'll be a link to that playlist in the description. Until then, I hope you enjoyed.